One of the phrases is that you don't need to have earned a rest. So take a rest when you need it. You don't need to have earned it. The world won't end. The business won't fall apart if you just take a day off.
If there's some doubt, a lack of clarity around something, even if it's something really small, put it on the issues list. What happened is you've got the subconscious and the conscious clarity of the doubt that you had. You're now able to move forward.
I would say if it doesn't scare the pants off of you, then it's probably not worthwhile doing anyway. So let's put something up there that will scare the pants off of you. Welcome to another episode of Better Business, Better Life. I'm your host, Debra Chantry-Taylor, and today I'm joined by my business partner and little bro, work bro, Adam Harris. And we haven't spoken for a while, so I'm really looking forward to our chat this morning. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you. Yeah, really excited. We've been talking about following up on some of the podcasts we've done before. So, yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, it's going to be really good. So Adam and I obviously work together. We are both EOS implementers. We are both work with family businesses. And we also run a business called Integrated Executives, which is very much around helping you grow your business at all levels. So what I thought we'd do, we're going to do a couple of podcasts back to back, which you can listen to over the subsequent weeks. I thought we'd do a couple of topics. And the first we'll do is why businesses get stuck and what founders can do about it. And then next week, we'll launch the how founders get their companies unstuck. So because Adam and I have got a huge amount of experience over our years working with various different businesses, we're just going to chew the fat and we're going to talk a little bit about why businesses get stuck and what you can do about it as a founder. And then I've also asked D2, my very helpful chat GPT, to come up with 15 random questions that businesses often ask. So let's get started. Adam, first of all, why businesses get stuck? You've worked with a lot of businesses over your time, as have I. Why do you think businesses get stuck? What's the biggest issue you see?
Biggest issue. I think there's a couple of things. I think one is fear. So that is either fear of what has gone on in the past or fear around what may well happen in the future. So there's this aspect of kind of getting caught in this loop, decision paralysis, not being able to necessarily be able to move forward. And that may well be internal from kind of leadership team, key personnel, might be products or services, or it may well be the case of kind of the external market forces. I think the second thing is actually complacency. So there's this aspect which is, kind of, oh yeah, things are okay. The wheels are turning, things are happening, and I remember a saying that I picked up years ago, which is if you're not moving forward, you're going backwards very, very quickly. So, just kind of resting on your laurels, kind of becoming safe. And then, all of a sudden a war breaks out somewhere in the world, or there's a global pandemic, and the ability to be able to kind of move kind of faster and quick isn't there. The muscle hasn't been working. What about you?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that as you were saying it. It's like it's often we do become complacent when times are really good, and therefore, yeah, we haven't been working on that quick to move and taking the opportunities. And I think that happens. You see that happening a lot when we have crises in the world. But I also think that sometimes, even within larger companies, the founders, what I'm seeing more and more of is that they're initially able to kind of let go as they build a team around them, and then if they're not focused on the right things, they actually come back in and they start meddling again. And so you see them actually starting to get involved in everything again because they're not focused on the right things, which means they then become the bottleneck and they become the person that actually kind of holds back some of the things that are happening. And it's just because they've lost their own clarity and what they need to be focused on. So I'm seeing quite a bit of that at the moment.
Do you think that there's also a challenge there, which is there's a lack of accountability for the owner or the visionary?
Yeah, and I mean, I've just, as you know, I read a lot, and I've just been finishing reading the Visionary book by Mark Winters, and I sort of think that especially, I mean, if they're running EOS, they've got no choice, right? Because we give them their accountability, or we help them develop their accountability chart, and they've got some really strong accountabilities, but often it just drifts over time, or they haven't ever set that intention in the beginning. And so they bring in all these really super experienced leadership team people. They allow them to kind of run the business, and then they start meddling again because they don't have that clarity around what they're meant to be focusing on.
Mm.
So tell me a bit more about the fear, because I do see the fear side as well. So tell me a bit more about your experience of the fear and what really drives it and what they can do to get past it.
For me, fear is an acronym of false evidence appearing real. S- I often find that it's kind of quite linked to the aspects of complacency, but I think what often happens is that, especially when there's been a variable of either good or bad, is that the kind of the curse of knowledge kind of kicks in. We often talk about it, not just from an EOS perspective, but as coaches, about kind of, the tunnel of vision of what you can see. And actually, the ability to often come out every 90 days and step up and have a, helicopter view, or to challenge your assumptions. And I know what I've observed with a lot of teams and a lot of businesses is that they just get caught and constrained on situations or events or relationships that have happened previously. And it's kind of like, it's often the case of, if you were to get 10 pieces of feedback, nine of which were good and one of which was negative, human nature dictates that we focus on the negative. So I feel that often I see teams and businesses is that they focus on the negative and the fear, and that constrains them from actually stopping them from kind of breaking free and trying new things and doing things differently and challenging the status quo and looking at a different way of doing things to kind of create the momentum and the energy and the challenge, not just with the leadership team, but from the wider business, to then be able to go, okay, cool. So what's got us to this point? Is this what's going to get us to where we want to go? Or how, where, and what do we need to do differently individually, as a team, and then as a business?
It is interesting. I know that in a lot of my quarterlies, I see the teams that are doing exactly that, focusing on the negative stuff, like when they're reviewing the previous quarter. And look, don't get me wrong, you've got to be really honest about how things have actually gone, and you've got to learn from those mistakes and take them forward. But I see them where they've hit sort of 4 out of their 5 numbers or high level measurables, and they've done sort of 80% of their rocks, and then you ask them to actually grade the quarter, and they can be really tough on themselves. It's like, oh, come on. Where's the celebration of success? I think sometimes they forget to think they focus on those things that aren't going so well, and not necessarily focus on the things that are going well. And then I saw a brilliant quote the other day, which I think kind of sums a little bit of this stuff up. It's like, we get into this fighting fires, and we get into the thrill of solving problems and issues as they're growing as fires. And it's like, I think there's quotes at some of the lines of, if you keep encouraging fighting fires, you're just creating arsonists in the business.
Yeah,
That's true.
it is. And it's interesting as you kind of say that, is that, again, I think some people who have got narcissistic nature, they love that aspect around the chaos. So when you help them, or when they've helped themselves kind of get through that, and they've put out all the fires, which for me, actually, I feel is the really exciting piece. It's like, now we've built the foundations, how and what can we kind of go through from there? Is that sometimes, like you say, people actually become arsonists and they want to start fires because they live in that chaos theory. And I think, for a lot of businesses, is that that's the norm. And actually, there's kind of like some new learning that kind of needs to go through, is that if we can build those foundations, what are the possibilities? What are the opportunities for us to then go individually and as a team to really start working and to really start making a difference? And I think for me, this is where, when we start working with teams and we talk about, the 10-year target, the big, hairy, audacious goal, and on the face of it, it looks absolutely impossible. That's when it actually then starts coming to fruition, because when you sort out the shit, the bottom, that then builds the foundations, go, like, cool, we can now go. And the kind of hockey stick, I know it's a bit cliche, but I think it's so important. And I think that's the thing, is that for some teams, there's a fear of actually being positive, upbeat, and being able to move forward.
Actually, it's really true. I've seen a lot of it just recently where we've revisited some 10-year targets, and they were a little bit like, they weren't really impossible enough. And I think that they weren't all that motivating. And I think it's because they get stuck in but we don't know how we're going to get there. And as you and I know, you don't actually need to know the how, right? You just need to know where you're going, and then you will find a way to get there. And it does involve changing who you are being as much as what you are doing, because what got you to here will not necessarily get you to there. And I've noticed that when we change it, they're all a bit scared. And I always say, if it doesn't scare the pants off of you, then it's probably not worthwhile doing anyway. So let's put something up there that will scare the pants off of you. But then you see this energy kind of change in the room because suddenly there's an excitement about what is possible because it takes them away, I think, from that thinking about fighting fires. And I call it polishing the turd, is like trying to get more and more out of the existing stuff rather than looking at what you could do differently.
I think there's also a thing there, which is around some people don't want to move. And that, again, that may well be individually, it may well be as a team. And that's okay. As long as you can just be open and admitting and saying, actually, this is where we want to be. We like it like this. With change comes uncertainty. It creates growth, creates challenge. And, I think some teams are absolutely ready for it. And, and they embrace all of that. And then others need some time to transition. But some individuals and some teams, they're just not up for it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think what's important is kind of openly admit and go, you know what? We are okay where we are. The pace of which we're going, the speed of change is okay by us. We want to, we're happy in growing 1% per year or, continuing the way we are. There's not the hunger, the desire, or the appetite, which is matched by, the real effort and energy that's going to be needed to get them to where, some people want to ultimately get to.
I think that's a really good point, actually. I think it is okay. Like, not every business needs to grow. I mean, I do always say to people, if they want to come and work with me, there's no point in coming and working with me unless you do want to grow, because that's where we're headed. But it's true. Like, for some people, I remember working with an agency back in the old days, and they just didn't want to go beyond 12 people. And it's like they had it in their mind that once you got beyond 12 people, it got harder. And there was this whole thing around, the more people you have, the more difficult it becomes. I tried everything in my power to convince them that no, actually, the bigger the business gets, the easier it becomes for you as the founder and the owner. But that's what they wanted. And it's like, okay, well, if that's what you want, there's nothing wrong with it. But like, at least be honest about it and just stick with it.
Yeah, and those self-limiting beliefs, human potential, team potential is huge. And, never underestimate what you can do. And if there's people that are listening to this and, it's kind of like, oh, I can't do that. It's like, well, why not? There's plenty of examples, hundreds of thousands of examples right on the extreme end, of human potential of those people that do things that you never think are possible, and then teams. But it's kind of a case of, I think honesty with self is a real challenge for a lot of people. And, I could remember a team that I started working with, and I only worked with them for 2 sessions because I asked them at the end, towards the end of the second session, it's like, I'm not sure you guys have got the hunger and the desire to actually do this. And that's okay, because I can't work with you, because I need to be working with teams that want to grow and push. Here's my suggestion, self-implement, do what you need to do. And at the point where you want to go from here to here, and you really want that exponential growth, give me a call. They've never called me.
And look, one day they might. I mean, I always say I've had clients who've literally disappeared off the face of the earth for 2 or 3 years and then kind of come back and gone, right, we're ready now. And at least and then they come to you that they truly are ready because they've made that decision themselves rather than kind of being forced into it or feeling like they're being, that, the whole should, oh, but we should want to grow. It's like, no, you've actually got to genuinely want to grow, because this stuff, it requires change, right? It's not easy. I mean, it's simple, but it isn't easy. And so if you really, really want high growth, there has to be a true commitment, not only from you as the founder, but from the entire team as well.
Yeah, and and as you were saying that, I was thinking, and I'm sure you've had this before, where, when we talk about having the right people, on the bus, is, it's those conversations are incredibly difficult, and I have hats off to, visionaries or integrators or leadership teams that are able to have those real open dialogue and those challenging conversations without a facilitator. I'll be honest, I haven't seen it very often. I'd probably count it on, less than one hand. And often it's a case that, there's a perceived willingness and desire to want to grow, but with that comes the challenge. And part of that challenge is having the one-on-one conversations and going, hey, Deb, I'm not sure that this is the right thing for you anymore. Let's have a chat. And I often find, I'm sure you do, is that sometimes those teams that come back, it's like there's been that natural attrition of those people that didn't get it or want it, have kind of left. It's like, okay, cool. Now we're ready to go. It's like, you were ready 2 years ago, but you weren't ready to have those tough conversations.
Or you didn't have the right people around you, and that can often be the case. And so it's interesting. And it's one of the things I also see a lot of is with founders, they will keep hold of people because they've been loyal. You know, but they're loyal and they're great. And it's like, yeah, but are they actually holding you back? And I think anybody listening to this, sometimes you have to think really long and hard and go, do I really have the right people around me? Are they truly the people that will get me to where I want to go in the future? And loyalty is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But it's not a wonderful thing if that person is holding you back from what you need to achieve. And, you know, that if you have to have that tough conversation, they have to go, it'll work out in the long run. Like, it'll be better for the company and it will be better for the person that you're actually letting go, because they're going to be unhappy if you continue to grow the way you want to, and they're in an environment that doesn't suit them.
Well, and you kind of lead on to what if, as the visionary, is you're the bottleneck?
It is interesting because it's not just about bottleneck. Actually, different stages of business actually require different visionaries and different integrators. This is some of the work I've been deep diving into recently, is that, you know, the visionary that got you to, we always look at the people who get you to here may not get you to here, but the visionary who got you to here may not get you to here. And the integrator that you need right now may not be the vision or the integrator that you need in the future, because there are different types of integrators. There's the slow and steady ones that kind of keep things kind of going and help to harness that chaos. And then there is those that really kind of push for the growth while still keeping the chaos under control, but really a very different mindset.
And there's a whole aspect around ego and letting go and holding on to the baby. Yeah, and look, if there's visionaries that are listening to this who are like, if I'm being really honest with myself, maybe I'm the issue, challenge, or opportunity. Like, seriously, speak to Deb or I, or speak to somebody else. Like, you need to be challenged, and sometimes the team that you've got around you, you've created a buffer where they're not able to, or they don't feel comfortable or empowered enough to challenge you the way that they should be. And I'm sure you've done that for the right reasons, but you need to have that challenge.
It's absolutely true. And I think it's one of the things I always talk about, you know, when people think about EOS implementation, they think that we come in to kind of help teach them the tools, which we absolutely do, but I don't think it's where our real skill lies. I mean, sure, don't get me wrong, we're brilliant teachers for sure, but it isn't the teaching that's the big. I mean, anybody can hop online, watch YouTube videos, read some books, understand how the EOS tools work. Where the real gold comes is when you actually start to create that healthy team, that environment where we are enabling people to have those tough conversations, where they're not afraid to really talk about the elephant in the room. And sometimes it's just easier for us because we're outsiders and we don't have that fear. I've never been fearful of ever being sacked. In fact, I always say I go into every session sort of hoping I get sacked, because that means I've actually really pushed them out of their comfort zone. But we also see things from an outside perspective as well. So no fear, got an outside perspective, and we pick up on little cues. I don't know about you, but when I'm watching the room, you just see these little things. You kind of go, oh, there's something there. I need to kind of push with that. Whereas if you're trying to be the visionary, the founder, the person who runs the business, the person who runs the meetings, the person who runs the quarterly sessions, the annual sessions, it's really hard to play all of those roles and do them really well.
I'm known for being a bit of a stickler and just sitting there, kind of going really quite quiet, and then just go, I'm wondering, what are you thinking? And often it's just that subtle thing that gives somebody, the permission to go somewhere, ask a question, bring a point up that either A, they didn't feel comfortable in doing, or B, that they didn't actually think that it was worthwhile adding to the conversation. And one of the things I often say is that say what you're thinking, because that actually then starts the thread of somebody else going, oh, actually, that's taken my brain down somewhere else. It's a little bit like this conversation. You say something and then my brain then goes, oh yeah, what about this? And then that's what's really important in these sessions. But I think as a leadership generally is that spark of energy. It's kind of like, flying all over. That's what creates the opportunities. sometimes it's not what's right in front of us. We need to kind of dig a little bit deeper. We need to challenge all those assumptions, be supporting of each other. And when you've got that environment, it's so much better.
That's so true. Okay, so we've gone completely off script and just chatted about random things, but we have talked, so a couple of things, there's fear that potentially holds you back. There is that almost like when everything becomes so calm, founders often want to jump back in and create a bit of chaos, usually because we haven't been very clear about what we want and expect from them. I've asked D2 to obviously write us a few questions, so I thought we'd just give this a bit of a shot and see how it goes. So question number one, and this is the first time I'm reading them as well. So why does running a business seem to get harder as the company grows?
Okay, so I think that's a perception. It was interesting you were saying, yeah, and it was interesting, like you said before, about that example of that company who said, we don't want to go past 12. I think, do I think or do I know? I know from the companies that I've worked with is that if you have no structure, if you have no clarity, if you have no process, then yes, it is challenging because you're trying to bring everybody on the journey. And if you don't know what the journey is and you don't know what the destination is that basically it's just a bit of a clusterfuck, really. I think if you are able to, I mean, obviously we talk about EOS, but there's other systems and frameworks out there. If you create structure, you create foundations, you get, you do the basics and get the right people sitting in the right seats. I don't believe it has to be difficult. I actually think, and you often talk about, business is a game. Like you can make it fun. It doesn't need to be complicated. I think for me is that if you have got the reps as a team and as a business of identifying where the issues, the challenges or the opportunities are, and B, you're able to process and work through them fast and quick, it doesn't have to be a challenge.
No. And I think you're absolutely right when you get the things like the structure, the accountability, the being able to measure the right things so we can see if we're on track or not. When you've got a game plan, if you like, if you've got an actual game plan, you're not you're not growing and growing the chaos with you. You're growing with clarity and you're growing with that ability to go, this is what it looks like, and it's scalable. So, and I think the larger the business gets, the more defined each of those kind of accountability seats becomes. And then as a founder, you actually have less and less and less to do in the day-to-day running of the business. You've got the integrator running it and they're running it smoothly because they've got all that clarity and accountability. It becomes easy. You can almost step away. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is that when you then can step away, then you feel like you're useless. That's what I see people. It's like, well, now what do? I don't have to get involved in the day-to-day business. What's my purpose? And so getting back into your visionary roots and going, what is it I'm really great at and where do I create things? One of my clients, and I've got to share this, in their accountability chart as the visionary, his very first bullet point is jazz hands. And jazz hands is what he's good at, right? And it's like, and that's what he does. Like, he goes out there, he loves being on stage, he loves creating opportunities, he loves doing, and that's what we want him to do, because that is where he creates magic for the business and for the industry. So get out of the day-to-day running, get that clarity, get somebody running the business for you, a good integrator, and then you can go back to doing the jazz hands.
Yeah, I love what you said there about that's where he's doing or delivering the magic. And I often find that visionaries know and understand what that magic is, but the constraints or the restrictions or the lack of something means that they're not doing that magic anymore. And actually, when and I don't believe you can just, change it like that. There needs to be some time, energy, and effort that's put in. But when you can get the visionary back in that magic space, that's golden. I think, it's almost like when the visionary is in that space doing the magic, it's worth like hundreds of people, because their ability, that's kind of like, it's almost like, the Rubik's cube just clicks in and then it goes gold and chung, it's like, wow. And then the trajectory sometimes can just be phenomenal because we've worked out. And I think the challenge for a lot of visionaries is often they don't know what that is, or the magic that they had when they first started or entered the business has been lost. So when you can help them, and when the team, and I think it's really important that when the team can help them find that, it's just, it's almost like it kind of reminds me of when I used to be a teacher, and you used to call it the light bulb moment, where you'd see a student somewhere in the classroom and they just got it. Sometimes it was really, really subtle. I know you and I have spoken about this before. Sometimes you see those subtle changes of movements. The individual doesn't actually realize it in the moment in the session room, and you kind of come back next quarter or at the end at the annual, and they go, "Oh my God, this happened." It's like, yep, I can remember and trace back exactly the point when that happened, because it was the question or the situation that literally the neurons started firing and they just started moving.
Oh, it is absolutely God. It's magic. And yeah, it's what we do. And I think that's probably why I get such a buzz out of the work that we do. Okay, the next question I think we might have already answered, but what are the most common reasons successful companies suddenly feel stuck?
I do feel we have covered it.
Yeah, I think we've covered that. We've covered it in terms of the fear and the changes in the environment. And I think that's not having that strong vision in terms of an exciting vision, the impossible goal that really gets you all motivated behind it.
I think the other thing I would just add is that actually about ownership and accountability is a key part, and that if there are those doubts, it was interesting. You and I got before we kind of started this. It's like, what's going on? Do you know what? I'm feeling a bit meh. Okay, cool. What's going on? So I actually think sometimes in just owning it and kind of go, yeah, I'm feeling a bit stuck. Okay, cool. Is it you feeling stuck? Is it your team? Is it the business? Cool. Let's explore it. And I think that's the opportunity, is that when those situations, which sometimes are really obvious, but actually sometimes it's a little bit more subtle. When you're able to just turn around at the leadership team and you're checking in, or you put on the issues list going, I'm not feeling 100%. Okay, cool. What's going on? Let peel away the layers. Like, and again, it kind of comes back to what we said before, is that, you can deal with the fires, but once you get through the fires and you're kind of you're in a different state, is having that openness and that honesty individually, I think is really, I feel it's so important, because if I'm feeling it, then either A, you felt it previously, B, you might be feeling it now, or C, you're going to feel it at some point in the future. So what do we need to do? And you kind of work through it. It's like, actually, Adam, don't do any work today. Cool. Okay, cool. Go for a walk. You know, do what is going to bring you a bit more joy, get through that funk or whatever it is to come out the other side.
And that was really interesting because again, you probably know this, but on my shower wall, I have a little bit of a plan for the year and a few of my affirmations and things. And one of the things that was on there was about being kind to yourself. And I think one of the phrases that I use is that you you don't need to have earned a rest. So take a rest when you need it. You don't need to have earned it. And that's a difficult one because we're in this kind of hustle culture where we're told that, you need to be on all the time, you need to be going all the time. And I'm an active relaxer. So trying to just, find time to relax is always hard for me. But it's sometimes you just do need to do that. And the world won't end. The business won't fall apart if you just take a day off and go, fuck this. I need some time out. And fuck this, I'm off to Narnia. Like I need to go and do something a bit different just to get myself out of it. And yeah, I think giving yourselves permission to just go, it's okay to do that.
It's often challenging as a visionary, specifically, to be able to see, sense, and understand that. And for me, the tightness of a team, specifically the leadership team, is when there's the awareness of the rest of the team to kind of be putting something on the issues list. Hey, next issue, Deb, your health, your well-being, your mindset, like whatever it is, in kind of going, hey, look, here's what I've observed. This is what I believe the issue is. Cool, let's talk about it as a team. I think that really, if I lean into kind of that aspect to kind of the five dysfunctions, it's really about connection and knowing that if I have the conversation, it's going to be challenging for me, but also for the other person. But actually, if I don't have the conversation, where and what's going to happen, it's almost like kind of, it's the building of the volcano. And sometimes the valve or the energy will release naturally, but sometimes it won't. And I think I've observed that really highly effective teams are prepared to have those conversations.
Vulnerability as well. A really healthy team is okay to be vulnerable because they've got that trust, and so therefore they can actually do that. Okay, question number 3. Is it usually a strategy problem or an execution problem when companies stall?
You could take this one first.
Okay, cool. Yes. I mean, I love this one because I don't think it's ever a strategy problem. I think that it is really more, well, I would say it's not necessarily about execution, but it is around shared vision, being on the same page, which I suppose is a little bit of strategy, but it really is about what do we need to do to kind of keep moving things forward. I think companies get stuck. They've got this perfect strategy of what they're going to do, but they're not actually, they don't have the accountability. They're not making the right steps forward, taking the right steps forward, and they're also not looking at what's really holding them back. Maybe they're doing surface level, what I call surface level issue solving, rather than getting really deep to go what's going on. And the example that I give is one of my clients. I remember observing a level 10 meeting, and they had a scorecard measurable, which was about face to face calls. That was how the business came in, right? And they weren't hitting it. And they hadn't hit it for weeks and weeks and weeks. And when I observed the level 10 meeting, they didn't drop it down. And I said, why have you not dropped that down? It's been off track for weeks. They're like, oh, we know why it's off track. Yeah, but that doesn't make it any better. So you might well think you know why it's off track, but to not talk about it and just go, well, we know why it's happening. Surely the business is not getting to where it needs to get to because we're not doing the work that needs to get it there. And so then we dropped it down and we had the conversation around it. And it's absolutely true. They did know why it wasn't happening. It's because the person who was accountable, being the founder, didn't actually like doing face to face calls. And so it's like, yeah, but that's great to know that. But now we have a real issue that we have to solve. And we just did some proper IDSing and got to the root cause of it and changed a few things around it. But so to me, I think it's about that execution. It's like, what are we at? Are we being honest about what's really going on? And are we actually doing something about it to move forward?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. For me, culture is actually, you have to have the right culture. We tolerate what we accept to then be able to have the execution. Ensuring that there's the challenge, there's the rigor, there's the accountability. All of that culture needs to exist to ensure that you are executing against the strategy. And again, I often find companies have been doing well, and often it's because of external circumstances, or sometimes it's luck. But actually, having the right strategy in place is key, but the execution part, I agree, is so much more important, because you need to once the execution is working, you can be reviewing and changing the strategy like we do every 3 months. But you can have the world's best strategy, and if it's not being executed, you're not going to ever going to hit it.
We're on the same page. I love it. Okay. Number 4, why do leadership teams often become misaligned as the company grows?
So I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is values. There's a values misalignment. The company has its own values. The individuals are misaligned. Circumstances change. Individually, collectively, things, start moving or are different. And I think probably the biggest one I observe is kind of the team or the business, or the individual being outgrown. So you kind of mentioned it before, what's got you to this point is not necessary, or the person that's got you to this point is not the one that's going to get you to that next point. And I think, there's a level of honesty, radical candor, being frank and fearless in having those conversations consistently to make sure, hey, am I or are you the right person for this seat to be able to move forward? And again, a high performing team is able to have that realization probably 3 to 6 months before it's going to become a real bottleneck. If I'm able to go, hey, look, team, it's been a great ride up to this point, but I'm not the person to take this forward. Or you turn around and go, hey, Adam, I'm wondering, are you the right person to take this forward? Like, if you're able to get that 3 to 6 months before it is going to become a real problem. I think that's a real high performing culture.
And it's that whole GWC, right? Gets it once it has capacity. They might still get it. They might have the capacity to do it, but if they don't want it anymore, it's really important to have that conversation with them. Well, if they don't have any of those three, but I think the want often disappears after a while as well. And so you've got to have that conversation about, you still really want to be in this role. You still really want to do it. And that applies to the founder as well, not just the leadership team.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, I mean, obviously for our EOS clients, we have this rigor of coming back together every single 90 days and really revisiting the vision, revisiting the sort of the plan to get there, revisiting the accountabilities, the scorecard, the processes, all of that is reviewed every 90 days. And I've noticed when companies are either self-implementing EOS or maybe not doing anything at all, it slips. Like they just don't come back every 90 days because there's other stuff going on. And I've seen it even with my EOS clients. You know, we all have it where the client says, "Oh, I can't do this quarterly because something's come up," and it gets pushed out. And so by the time you catch up with them, it's way more than 90 days. And they've slipped off the tracks, off the railway tracks, because they've just, everything else has got in the way. And so therefore the misalignment comes because we haven't actually agreed what's important and what we need to do and how we need to move forward. And look, let's be honest, we've done it with our own business. Integrated executives, if I'm being real hand on heart, we're finally getting to have our quarterly this week, but we haven't done that for a while. And so more by luck than anything else, the business has continued to do really well. And the fact we have a good integrator in there now as well. But, because we haven't got together regularly, there's probably some misalignment there. How can there not be if you're not having regular conversations?
And that recalibration piece is so important. We talk about this aspect around, taking a view and coming up above the forest to see which ways where you're cutting through. I feel that it's kind of this aspect of, what's my favorite?
Clarity creates confidence.
And that's it, is that, I missed circumstances meant I couldn't attend an L10 meeting with my EA a couple of weeks ago. I kind of felt completely lost for a whole week because I just didn't know what was going on. I wasn't sure, are we aligned on this? What's going on? And it really becomes such a key part to have the rhythm and the cadence and the consistency. I'll be completely honest. Like I'm all over the place with the way that my brain works. I don't necessarily like structure. I'd do anything to fight against structure, but actually having the rigor and having the consistency has made things so much easier for me because I've got clarity and understanding. I know what's going on. I know where we're doing it. I know why we're doing it. And if I get out of sync, that's when my brain starts going into a different area. And often I've felt previously is kind of those, it's actually more about the people than it actually is about other things. It's like, I'm not sure what Deb's thinking anymore. I'm not sure if we're actually kind of aligned, which then if we don't have the conversation, then creates a level of doubt. And doubt then creates a level of anxiety. And then anxiety creates a level of fear. And fear then creates a level of real deep. And all of a sudden, it's because I haven't had the area or the space to have the conversation.
And I think what we're guilty of, what a lot of our other, because we're both visionaries in our business as well. I'm a visionary. I'm a visionary, and we've got our own integrator. But we have a VVI meeting, a visionary integrator meeting with our integrator just to keep on the track. I think you and I are always on the same page as we're talking a lot. We have a lot of communication. We sometimes have, we're getting back into that rhythm of having it with the integrator to ensure that Karen is on the same page as us. But thinking broader than that, and this is what I see happen with my own visionaries as well. Even the VI might be on the same page, but if you're not engaging with the rest of your team, which we've got other teammates out there who probably have no idea what we're thinking, if I'm really honest. So it's like, we need to get back to that rigor of also making sure they're brought on the thing. And I think that's where the misalignment comes from. People have to hear things how many times, Adam, before they hear it for the first time?
32.
32, that's right. So 32 times. And so it used to be 7. And I used to say to people, if you told them once or twice, you've still got 5 or 6 more times to go. Well, now if you told them once or twice, you've still got 30 more times to go. And so, that is the alignment only comes when you're regularly repeating things, regularly sharing things, regularly communicating, because as we know, clarity creates confidence.
If you're listening or watching this and there's some doubt of a lack of clarity around something, even if it's something really small, put it on the issues list. Like, seriously, for the sake of, hey, I just need clarity on X. Cool. Thank you. 1 minute. What happened is you've got the subconscious and the conscious clarity of the doubt that you had. You're now able to move forward. Like, otherwise, and I've had this for myself, it just compounds. Like, and all of a sudden you get to the stage and it's like, it's so much bigger than it actually is. And all it actually really needed is to just ask a question, you know, and again, I feel sometimes that this is something that people miss within the L10 meetings is sometimes it's important if there's an update that you think the leadership team need to know, or there's a question that you've got, it doesn't have to be a big, long-winded issue. Sometimes it can just be, hey, here's the issue. Hey, Dave, just to let you know, we won that piece of work that I was pitching for. Solved. Done. You don't need to then have, dissect it even further. Sometimes it's the case that actually it's just a case, I just need to communicate through because this is the environment, this is our team. And I feel sometimes that goes unnoticed.
So true. I mean, that issues list, I always hate the term issues list because it makes it feel like it has to be a negative, but it's also about sharing the good news. It's also about sharing the opportunities. So that, and just having that regular communication around things. Okay, I am conscious of time and we're only up to question number 5. So I think we're going to answer question number 5 and we're probably going to completely change the format. We're going to actually call this a day for today, and then we're going to come back and we're going to answer the rest of the questions in podcast number 2, which means we're probably going to now have 3 or 4 podcasts. But let's finish off with question number 5. So how do founders accidentally become the biggest bottleneck in their own company?
I feel the biggest reason why this happens is there's a lack of awareness. And what I mean by that, and I've worked with probably over 300 visionaries over the years in various different guises, is, well, surely it's everybody else's problem or everybody else is the issue. I can't be the problem. I'm the founder. I'm the owner. I'm the managing director. I'm the CEO. And I feel that the challenge often is that the team, the business, the other stakeholders are very rarely holding the mirror up in front of the visionary's face. Even if they're not performing what they say or what they should be doing, is nobody has the permission, the gravitas, the authorization, the accountability, whatever word you want to do, to kind of turn around and go, hey, Deb, you're not performing. Often I found is, and I'm sure you found the same, is that as the external facilitator and the external coach, is that I often have always worked on this phrase is that if I feel uncomfortable, I'm playing in exactly the right space. So I'm more than happy to turn around and go, hey, are you sure? Are you sure it's not you? I feel that A, self-awareness, B, culture, being able to have the challenge through from others.
I completely agree. I think that there's often, you'll talk to visionaries and they'll sort of say, oh, my team would be perfectly comfortable with having that conversation with you. You just know that they wouldn't. And it's about helping them to sort of see that. And then also I think it's also just sometimes that they say they feel like they've lost their value because they're no longer involved in the day-to-day running of the business. Because if you even some of my larger team, it's amazing how much the visionary is still involved sometimes in the day-to-day stuff. And when they get to the point where they're no longer having to be, I think they feel lost. And so what happens is they come back in, they start meddling again, and then they become the bottleneck again because the bottleneck doesn't necessarily mean everything stops with them, but it can be those end runs as well, which creates the bottleneck. So they go around the integrator to talk to the R&D person or talk to the salesperson because they've got this idea. And because they go around the integrator, then you've got this confusion going on in the team. So it creates a bottleneck, not so much because it's all coming through one person, but because they're scrambling around in all different areas and there's nobody knowing exactly where they should be headed. So I see that a lot, is that they just kind of feel like they haven't got a purpose anymore. And so they want to start meddling back in the business again.
Yeah, I've got one visionary who I'm working with. I've been working with him for a number of years, and we often talk about where's your mojo at, and it's really been important for him to understand where he gets his mojo from, because at times, depending on where the business is at and what's going on within the business, is he can't necessarily get the mojo from the business. So we've had to find other areas. You know, he actually has now set up 2 other businesses that he's involved in, because he needs that. It's almost like that's his energy, that's his invigoration. He needs to ensure that he's getting that on a consistent basis. And I often find that a lot of visionaries, a lot of founders, they can't get that. They can't get the same buzz and they can't get the same energy that maybe they've had within that kind of early part. Kind of goes back to one of the questions before, is that, you know, when you have a team and you're able to kind of see the whites of the eyes in everybody and you know everybody's names, actually that's a different energy to when you've kind of probably got 100 people plus. It's like, you know, I can't manage and lead everybody. Again, you know, if you're listening to this and you're like, you know, where do I get my mojo from? And you might want to call it a different word, but like really spending some time thinking and leaning into that, I think it is a really important piece.
Perfect. And you can read the Visionary book by Mark as well. I think that's, again, one of my favorite books at the moment.
Where do you get your mojo from?
Where do I get my mojo from? I love helping people. So, I think that and that can be a danger in my own businesses as well, because it means that I kind of go in and I step in and I want to help people. And I use help with scare quotes, because I think I'm helping, but I'm actually just really messing around and really sort of fucking them up in terms of what they should be doing. So I've got to be very careful around that.
So I have a mantra, which is I create a world of change, challenge, and growth by holding space, asking difficult questions, and going into the danger zone. So, like for me, when I kind of feel the itch and the rub and the nervousness from others, it's like, cool, let's play. Doing it really respectfully and really, really supportively. So often, I come out of a session, working with a team, and I'm both fully energized and fully depleted of energy at the same point. So like kind of managing those levels is something that's really important.
I love the way you've actually articulated that, I think, because I think we're actually quite similar. I've got that kind of clarity around it, but I think that the helping is not helping as in wanting to do everything for people. It's about wanting to help them be better. I mean, I always talk about creating better lives. That's what really drives me, is how do I help you create a better life? And I think that you know, like you, I love to poke the bear. I love to kind of see what's going. I love to challenge people and get them thinking about things. But it always comes from a place of love, and that's why I call it help, because it's there to. I want them to see, for the greater good of themselves, for the greater good of the business, what actually is possible. Okay, well, we're going to have to call that time for this particular podcast, as we could sit here talking for hours. So if you've had anything in this podcast or heard anything in this podcast that makes you kind of think, yep, I wouldn't mind having a chat, Adam and I truly do live by that value of help first. We would absolutely love to have a conversation with you. So the contact details for us are in the show notes. Please give us a call, drop us an email, whatever works for you. We'll be back again next week covering off the remaining kind of 10 questions. And after that, we'll have another episode around what founders can do to get their companies unstuck. So Adam, any final words before we wrap up this podcast?
Clarity creates confidence. Take some of the things that we've spoken about today and maybe just sit and have a clarity break and ponder some of the things that we've covered.
Love it. Hey, thank you so much. Always enjoy our little chats. I'll see you again shortly.